All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here tonight. This session is called Whose Harm Counts Now? And that question is not rhetorical. The enforcement landscape workers rely on to report harm is actively shifting. We are here tonight to talk honestly about what it means for you, what to document, what to escalate, and how to protect yourself when the systems you normally turn to may not be operating the way you expect. You are not alone in navigating this, and this conversation is surely for you, not for your manager, not for your HR department, for you. Before we dive in, a few quick things. This session is being recorded. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll get to them towards the end. And please, we ask that you hold this space with care. Some of what our panelists are shared tonight may be personal, so let's get into it. Our first panelist is B. Away. Uh, is an HRBP, sorry, in talent development with nearly a decade of experience in building equity, centered learning programs, and creating career pathways for underrepresented communities. Her work has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Fortune, Wired UK, and she brings both the practitioner lens and the lived in understanding of what it actually costs workers to navigate these systems. Please welcome B. Away. Have anything you want to add?
Nothing. You captured it so perfectly. I'll just call out that I'm a little under the weather, so you're going to be seeing me wiping my nose, but I'm happy to be here with y'all today.
No worries, no worries. Our second panelist is a healthcare operations leader who has spent more than a decade working inside some of this country's largest academic medical centers: Columbia University Irving Medical Center, Penn Medicine, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and now New York Presbyterian. He's joined us tonight not as a policy expert, but as something just as important: a gay professional who has navigated large, complex institutions and understand firsthand what it means to weigh in visibility risks and self-protection at work. He is an open advocate for the LGBTQ plus workers, psychologically safety, and holding institutions accountable to the people inside them. Please welcome Marshall Heck. Anything
Hi,
you'd like to add,
everybody.
Marshall?
No, you
All
again, you
right, so
summed it up
let's.
very well.
Oh, no worries. So let's get right into it. So we're in a moment where the agency workers have historically relied on support to report harm. The EEOC especially have shifted their enforcement priorities. For someone who's experienced something right now and wondering whether to report it formally, how do you describe what changed and what does that mean for them? B, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about the change in with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. And so basically, it comes as no surprise that this current administration is dismantling everything as it relates to the advancement of underrepresented and vulnerable populations, and the EEOC is no victor or not shy to this particular impact. And so the change specifically happens around thinking about disparate impact, right? And so like that is a particular piece of legal framework that was used to reinforce workers protections around discrimination. This current administration is chipping away at that, right? And essentially what they're trying to do is reinforce a colorblind, theoretical framework that does not work. Colorblind knows that it only reinforces and puts, certain groups of people at the top and other folks at the bottom, those who've historically been at the bottom. What that means, fast forward in terms of like you navigating the workplace, particularly like federal employees, right? Like I think EEOC is something that is available to all, but particularly for federal employees, that was a very like very real resource that people had access to. It's really, really, really challenging. That said, if you're experiencing like any type of hardships or just like what you may feel as discriminatory, and please don't like second guess what it is that you're feeling, you should still report. HR teams are in place and are obligated to, not only hear out the concerns, but actually actively investigate it. And so even though changes are happening with EEOC, teams are still obligated to be able to, when you hear anything related to protective categories, we have to take action. And then most importantly, I'll say this as like the HR person with the intel, like my experiences in tech, no company wants to go to court, right? Like most companies will settle outside of court. And so even though the EEOC is being like, we're still seeing the outcomes of what's happening with the EEOC change. Just know that we still have an obligation to protect and serve you, and you still have the courts as an option, right? Like there's still employment lawyers that will support you, and I understand that's costly, but I don't want you to feel like it's a zero sum game at this juncture. It can feel really disheartening, but you do have options and resources that are available to you.
Yeah, for sure. So, what would you tell a worker who's filed, a charge 6 months ago and now is wondering, is their case going to go anywhere?
Yeah, I would, you have a point person, a designated point person. I would, to the extent that it feels, it feels exhaustive and things like that, but you have to follow up with them, ask them like, help me understand the status of this particular case. What's the update? What should I know about? What should I be aware about? And just really leaning on that particular resource. That said, I think anything in life requires you to like be all in. And in this particular
Mhm.
climate, you have to advocate for yourself. And that's now more true than ever. And so just being on top of it with that particular advocate or resource point person that you have on the EEOC side.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to shift gears to you, Marshall. So you've been out as a gay professional inside some of the largest healthcare institutions in the country. When you heard about the EEOC rolling back enforcement priorities about gender identity and for transgender workers, what was your personal reaction, and did it change anything about how you think your own situation, think about your own situation at work?
No, not really. I simply because I always try and look at things from the root cause, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that over the past few years, there have been some people who have felt as if it was in their minds. Of course, we know that this isn't true, but in their minds, there was the overarching sentiment that things were becoming too balanced. It was becoming
Hmm.
far too fair, and we were having far more resources to protect us. I've even heard terms like, people went overboard and it was overkill and it was just too much on everyone, right? And so the pendulum typically swings. So I had
Hmm.
anticipated that this would be something that would happen. Now, of course, I thought he was going to ease us into some of it, but
Hmm.
that didn't happen. I think we just got bum rushed into this, right? So essentially,
Hmm.
no, because most systems, even though they have been an aid, I have, and I hate to come from a pessimistic point of view, but I've always felt that they weren't technically there to protect me anyway. And a lot of the
Hmm.
legwork had to fall on me anyway. So, in order for me to even take 1 inch forward, then it would typically take a robust amount of documentation, having to
Hmm.
actually spend a lot of time documenting every single microaggression, understanding that any job you take, typically, if you are a minority, that becomes a part time job if ever you
Hmm.
think it could result in anything negative, right? Because you experience it a lot. So, in short, no, it didn't really change much for me other than making me a bit more cognizant.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Has it made you think differently about what you share, who you share with, or how visible you are?
Well, I've always been very judicious on whom I build rapport with at work. I
Hmm.
always say I have the gift and the curse of being a dual minority, right? So I'm African American and I'm gay. And so when
Hmm.
you encompass both, you read rooms extremely fast. It
Hmm.
becomes a survival skill, right? Because sometimes I can land in rooms with people who look like me and I may be met with homophobia. I could land in rooms with people who don't look like me, and I could be met with homophobia and racism, right? So I have to always be on. So I've always been really judicious on how I've shared myself at work. Now I come unapologetically as me. That I'm
Right.
not changing. I made a conscious effort to not change that. But any of the tidbits that I share, any of my comfort, I've always been very, very careful with whom I shared that with. It's just more so tightened the belt a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what would you tell other LGBTQ plus professionals in these large institutions and these corporate jobs? Like, who's trying to figure out like whether they're more exposed right now?
I think, understanding that everything is a spectrum and everything has nuance, right? I think my plight as a visibly open LGBTQ member, right? Like I wear nails, I have
Mm-hmm.
jewelry, I typically am doing my makeup. So it's very in your face when you see me. And I know that there are some colleagues that I've had that identify as LGBTQ, right? And they are more masculine presenting. So it's one of those if you know type of things, right? And so I would always say if you choose to live out loud, when I made this choice, it was something that I knew could always be an uphill battle. And I would tell anyone who is LGBTQ and outwardly like it's visible as soon as someone sees you, it is not something that is just innocuous, it just simply is what it is, right? I always
Mm-hmm.
tell those people when you walk into those rooms, just always be prepared for battle. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. You hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and it has always worked out for me that way.
Mm-hmm. Great. B, back to you. So let's, talk about, documentation. A lot of workers don't start building a paper trail until, they're already in trouble, already on a PIP, or already in a hostile situation. What do you wish workers knew about documenting before anything formal happens?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question, and I see this so much to your point. Like it becomes a reactionary practice, and I want us to get to a practice of it being proactive and just how we operate. And what that looks like is, for me, it's as simple as like your one-on-one document. And so, again, I occupy the tech space, been in the tech space for a while, but we have shared documents with our managers, right? This is where you're writing down tasks. And transparently, when I'm working with managers who are looking to performance manage an individual, I'm working with them on like the first thing I ask them for is like, hey, let me see your one-on-one doc. Did you give this person any feedback? And so the inverse of that, if you're an employee, the way you can think about this proactively is like using your one-on-one doc in the same way, right? Like how do you get very clear on what the expectations are? When is it delivered by? Any type of communications that y'all having, in addition to like Slack and Teams and things like that, it should be captured in your one-on-one doc. So from day one, you're just very clear about what the expectations are, timelines, and when you've delivered against it. Even at, I've seen people be as meticulous as like checking off that they've delivered at XYZ time, right? And so if you want to get to that next level of detail, I think it's always in your best interest. But that's how you proactively show up in these conversations. It's like day one, taking control and ownership of your career in that way, but also the benefit of that is that it serves you from a documentation perspective. That said, in addition to that, I mentioned Slack and Teams and things like that. Those are all a part of documentation. So be mindful what you're putting into those systems, because we can access them, we do access them, but also to your benefit. If someone says something crazy to you or sideways to you on those platforms, you can ask that it be resurfaced, right? And so just be
Mhm.
mindful about how you're utilizing those tools. They're there obviously to serve you, but be mindful get what gets dropped into them.
Yeah, I agree. I am more of a let's talk, like let's get on Zoom, let's get on Team, because you can take an email or Slack,
Oh
however
yeah.
you can set the tone for that. So I think it's better to, talk face to face on Zoom or whatever,
Yep.
just to, so you won't take it how you take it and I don't take it. Like we can both like be in the same
I think
vicinity
that
and
is
it won't
that is
yeah.
brilliant. If a manager is reaching out to you and it feels like, I mean, in general, there's a lot to get missed in text alone. So I think the best
Mhm.
practice there is like, hey, actually, let's get on a call and make sure that we're aligned on XYZ thing, right? And
Mhm.
then coming out of that call, what you're then going to do in Slack or Teams or whatever you have is say, like, okay, great. We align on this, that we're going to do XYZ thing by XYZ date. That way it's in writing and it's clear for the both of y'all. That holds both of y'all accountable to this thing or to this
Mhm.
particular timeline or deliverable that you're operating with.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any input on that, Marshall?
I do. I to that point about the one-to-ones, I think that was like spot on the nose. I think that oftentimes too, people don't realize that you can manage up, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes when we're communicating, we about managing down in our teams that report to us, right? But I think that what's really important is to manage up. So when you have a conversation with me, I automatically will send you a follow up email and say, hey, so just
Mm-hmm.
recapping everything, this is what we discussed, or I know we brought up these points, or X, Y, and Z. I think that technology has become a gift and a curse in this sense, right? I had a
Mm-hmm.
colleague,
Yeah.
a very dear friend of mine, who's in HR, and she told me, like, you know, when you're on Teams, like, you can have something up in Teams that kind of like summarizes everything that you spoke
Mm-hmm.
about. And it's actually a great tool, right? And I've used that in my current role when I'm meeting with any of the leaders who may report to me, and I'll give them this as like, hey, so this is all that we spoke about. Here are the deliverables. Here they are right here, right? So you do that managing down, you do the same managing up. And I always say, as cliche as it sounds and as old as it sounds, what is not in black and white did not happen. So if ever you
Mm-hmm.
want
Yep.
to tell us and it is not written down somewhere, it strictly did not happen. You made it up from the land of make believe. And so I think telling people that is also most helpful.
Yeah.
For
I'd be
sure.
curious. I'm sorry. I'd be curious, Marshall, what your perspective is. Like, a lot of folks, and you see this on social media a lot, and I can understand why it's happening, but also with my HR hat, I like kind of cringe when people record conversations, right? Unknowingly record. There's one thing to like use the Teams or Gemini to like record a meeting, but people are sneakingly like recording conversations, and I'm just curious, what's your take on that? Like, how do we set people up for success to do that in a productive way rather than in a sneaking way? And maybe the sneaking way is necessary.
So I think a few things go into that, right? So I think one of the big things is you if I'm going to be on a meeting with you, especially if it's a trusted colleague, I say to you, hey, just so you know, I'm going to be recording our conversation and I'm using it for X, Y, and Z purposes, right? So I typically will state that prior to us digging into the meat and potatoes of why we decided to meet. So that's the first part. The second part is I know there are some litigious things around if it's a one party consent state. If I'm not mistaken, again, guys, don't hold my feet to the fire on this. If I am not mistaken, New York is a one party consent state.
I
I
think
could
it
be
is,
wrong.
yeah.
So, with that being said, someone could record me at any time, right? And so, what I try to do is be cognizant of because sometimes in leadership, you are taught, like, don't put this in writing. This isn't a conversation you want to put in writing, right? You want to say this in person. In writing, you'll say this, but in person, that's when you can really get into what it is you want to say. But what I have found is that before you meet with anybody, uh, I always try and ask myself a question that someone asked me years ago. If someone read my text messages out loud, and if someone had a video recording of me and an employee having a conversation, if they played it in a courtroom, could I stand by everything I said? And so each time I go into a meeting, each time I go into these conversations, I try to speak as accurately. I try to withdraw emotion and stick to fact. Now, I'll sprinkle a little bit of emotion in there, but I try and stick to fact. And I think if that's the case, right, then my delivery, my cadence, my everything is up to par with what I think hospital standards are and HR standards are. And if it's ever used against me, I stand fully by it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think you're spot on, especially the call out around like just be mindful of what state you occupy when you're trying to take that action. We're here to empower folks to be able to advocate for themselves, and sometimes it feels like folks are looking for a segment to go viral on social media. So then the question becomes like, to what end are you recording? Like, is it for me as an HR professional? If I'm on a call and I get the sense that someone's recording, I am empowered to end the call, right? So we should also know that that is like a
Yes, you
reality
have
for
that
us on the
option.
other side.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
have that option. I think also depending on, I think a very underrated skill is reading the room. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if you read the room well and give yourself time to know your colleagues, your bosses, everyone, how the chips are stacked, who holds the cards, then you typically know how to maneuver those conversations, whether it should be recorded, whether this one can sit out, whether you trust this person enough that a quick follow up. So I always try to also encourage people, more importantly now than ever, is really read your room and environment.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Moving on, Marshall. So, LGBTQ plus workers often face a calculation when it comes to documentation because putting something in writing about a hostile comment or a pattern of exclusion can also mean outing yourself or making your identity part of your formal record you didn't choose to create. So, has tension been real for you, and how have you thought about it?
So when I entered the workforce, I was
Mhm.
already out of the closet. I have experienced where people have faced a tad bit of microaggressions in regards to sexuality that it was assumed that they were, and they weren't necessarily comfortable yet with disclosing that they were LGBTQ. I think,
Mhm.
unfortunately, it's one of those things that when you shield who you are from the LGBTQ community, that doesn't feel all too different for you, right? Like, as you navigate the world as an LGBTQ individual, you learn when to hide it, when you can't say it, and you learn what rumors or what opinions that people may orate about you. You learn how to kind of maneuver and stick and jive those. So I think what I
Mhm.
have seen, and it's an unfortunate case, is that most people who identify as LGBTQ, they already are equipped with the tools of hearing the rumors, how to hide them, and how to just act like they didn't exist. So it's not like a really happy answer for that one, but that's the answer.
Yeah. And I feel like now with this new current administration, like we're going backwards and that was never the goal. For me personally, I feel
Yeah.
like when you go to work, this is where you're spending 90% of your life, your time, etc.
Hmm.
Why can't I show up and be my authentic self? Why do I have to come with this, cover over me and, be just like everyone, be a robot, basically, and just not be myself?
Yeah.
Why does that have to affect of the work getting done, deadline being met? All of these things, are being done. How I show up, it shouldn't matter.
Well,
That's
people
how.
like optics, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
people are really into optics. And so even if you are a minority, and I've seen this firsthand, where
Mhm.
the minorities in the department are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They are typically the most outspoken and they have great
Mhm.
ideas and they have moved the needle and they provide mentorship. And oftentimes, those individuals will not be the faces of those departments. The faces that will interact with other departments will be very straight laced, typically around one ethnicity. And that is who a lot of organizations want to be sitting at the heads of those tables. And so
Mhm.
I think that's another thing that you grow accustomed to. That old adage of being twice as good to get half as much, right? Or
Mhm.
10 times as good if you really want to deep dive.
Yeah.
But I think that that is another thing that plays into that, is that you get so accustomed to being overlooked and just doing the work. And then at that point, the job just becomes a paycheck every 2 weeks. And that's when
Mhm.
you're miserable because being you isn't enough, right? And down
Right.
to being LGBTQ, but how many of my girlfriends who are African Americans, I think before they interview, right, they take their braids out or they say, oh, I got to press my hair, I got to interview tomorrow. like things like that, and not showing up as yourself. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So B, I wanted to ask, when workers is already inside a performance improvement process, a PIP, what should they be documenting and how? And what does a paper trail look like from that position?
Yeah. Um, so from a best practice perspective, anytime I'm working with a manager, and hopefully y'all see that I'm giving you the perspective of a manager because that enables you on how to show up as well, and be proactive in these situations. But from a manager perspective, whenever I'm working with a manager and putting an employee on a PIP or designing a PIP with a manager, we have they need to be able to lay out what the milestones are every week of the PIP. Generally the best practice, and it will vary by different type of organizations and industries, but at least in the tech companies I've worked at, we generally anchor on around 30 days PIP. So with a 30-day PIP, I want my manager to be extra clear on like what are the milestones per week, how are you measuring success of it. And so with that being the framework, I would say that is the thing that you want to come equipped with, right? So you now have this like paperwork or framework around what is expected of you of the next 30 days. You need to not only deliver on these things, but also demonstrate how you've delivered on it and have that
Mm-hmm.
conversation with your manager weekly. My expectation of all my managers is that you are having, in addition to your one-on-one, you're having a weekly sync with this individual on a PIP. So you have your weekly one-on-one and you have your PIP sync to talk about progress. There should be no surprises in that progress conversation, right? And so for you as the employee who's on the PIP, you want to make sure that you are obviously delivering on the milestones. And if anything is catching you off guard, be very clear to call that out in your weekly conversations, assuming you have one. And if it's not landing well, that is when you activate HR. That's when you reach out to your HR partner, your HRBP, to let them know, like, hey, I've delivered on these things and he's not properly, or they are not properly assessing this particular thing. So I think that's how you kind of stay engaged and stay ready in that particular experience, because I know the general conventional understanding is that people don't survive PIPs. I see people survive PIPs all the time, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot. So that being said, you just have to make sure that you are advocating for yourself in that way. So you're delivering on the milestones, and you're having your meeting with the manager weekly to talk about progress, and making sure that you all in lockstep together around what the quality that was delivered against those milestones.
Yeah. And also, escalation used to feel more, straightforward, HR, then EEOC, then an attorney. That path hasn't disappeared, but workers are making
Yeah.
it different, calculations now. How do you help a worker think through whether to escalate formally right now, given everything that's, shifted?
Yeah. I I'm choosing optimism. Choose optimism and have a plan. And what that
Mhm.
means is we essentially need to exhaust all options. So I would still follow the conventional paths, right? Like still absolutely activate your HR, your internal HR. If you're not getting any satisfactory responses there, reaching out to EOC. And look, with attorneys, I can deeply understand how costly they are, but sometimes all it takes is an email from an attorney. You don't even got to go to court. I can, again, I think it's important to be transparent. I get a lot of emails from attorneys that we just settle there. We don't even, it doesn't even escalate to like discoveries and all that. It just stops at the
Mhm.
email with the attorney and things like that, just surfacing the concern. And that being said, it may cost you a couple $100. I don't know, but like I do think you exhausted traditional options, but don't be afraid of reaching out to an attorney, because again, keep in mind that most companies will settle and settle long before like you will ever see a judge, because they just don't have the capacity. When everyone is making these gigantic cuts in the name of AI, the last thing anyone wants to do is to go to court, go to trial. And so I hope you all hold on to this piece. Like most companies are willing to settle or to negotiate long before trial is ever a thing.
Mhm. Also, like, what are the signs that holding off the right call, not out of fear, but strategically?
Can you say the question again?
Oh, yeah. What are the signs that holding off is the right
Ah,
call, not of fear, but strategically?
yeah. What is the sign that holding off is the right call? I wish there was like a one size fits all to this. It will vary. It would
Yeah.
yeah, it's so case by case.
Hmm.
Um, By all
This
means, Marshall, if you're
okay.
sitting with some ideas, please share. No,
Yeah,
no,
go
please
ahead.
share because I'm
I
stuck here. I'm
agree.
like, wow.
So I want to be PC. In the
Mm-hmm.
spirit of being PC, I think when you understand that we are in a very diverse population at work, there are some parties that maneuver how they do things very differently. And sometimes they maneuver with a smile, and sometimes they maneuver with the intent to make you at ease. And
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
so I am with a D there, and I say that as a way of forewarning. Um, I don't have the right answer for that one either, but I will say, with an assessment of the people whom you work with, again, understand that we are in diverse groups when we enter our workspaces. And there are some
Mm-hmm.
people more than others that are much more strategic in how they maneuver these things. And so while you can think that all is good and all is fine and I must be doing great, that could very well not be the case. So what I
Yeah.
say is anytime you feel you need to advocate, just have a quick chat. I tell people a 10-minute conversation doesn't hurt. I have friends who have reached out to free attorneys who they've just submitted their information. A 10-minute conversation gave them some strategy. There are attorneys
Yeah.
who will take it on, and in this day and age, I know people who skipped all of the processes and went straight to the
Mm-hmm.
attorney and got what they wanted while
Yep.
still retaining their job. So I would just say, you know, in short, with that one, it's always a dog eat dog world. And a good friend of mine said to me, it's either going to be you or it's either going to be me, and it ain't going to be me. So if you
Mm-hmm.
move like that, I think that you will protect yourself at all costs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
for
think that's a
sure.
brilliant point. What I will say, because you got me my brain going. One strategy to think about, and again, this is very context driven, context based. But like, if you have a high proof a burden of proof around your discriminatory experience, and the company is aware of that, there's a world where you can proactively ask for like a mutual separation. And again, that depends on like how much you want. What a mutual separation means, like both you and the company have decided that you're going to exit the company, but you're going to exit with some money, right? You're not going out empty handed. And so the question before you get to that point, you have to ask yourself, like, what to what end? What to what end do I want to keep fighting this? What is my goal in fighting this? I get justice is important. We all deserve justice. We're all black people on this call. We are overdue justice. But what is the like? What is the thing you're optimizing for through this experience? And if it's money, and there's no shame in getting money, right? Because we're living in and operating in a capitalist structure. If it is about the money, maybe you're preemptively asking for a mutual separation. That way, on the records, it shows that you have like kind of voluntarily left. There's no negative implication by that, but also you get your money and you go out and you never have to see them and interact with them again.
Yeah. I don't. For me, it hadn't gotten that far, and I just learned about mutual step when I started working for Cageburg. I'm
Yeah.
like, I never knew that that was a thing. I just thought maybe like either I quit or you fire me, nothing else. Like we don't have to. Um,
Yeah.
so mutual separation is new for me in
Yeah,
my book.
it's new for a lot of folks, and again,
It's
it's
still
a
for a
lot
lot of
of
people, yeah.
context. Yeah, it will require a lot of context before you go like proactively asking for it. You can't come off the block and
Hmm.
just like, oh, I want a mutual separation, because we'll be like, no, okay, go back to work, or you
Hmm.
can leave. Right? That
Hmm.
would be my response. So there's a lot of building up that has to get to that. But again, I think if it is very clear that you have been wrong and no one's doing anything, and asking yourself like to what cost, to what end, I think a
Hmm.
mutual separation could be a strategic opportunity.
Yeah. Did you want to put any input on that, Marshall?
No, I agree. I think sometimes if you feel like companies aren't stupid, right? And so, with companies not being stupid, they know when you got some meat on the bones or if they're going to have to settle with you real quick for a small amount. Sometimes the best
Hmm.
course of action, in my opinion, is probably to, you can ask as it gets there. I've known people who have asked for a mutual separation and it's worked in their favor. Now they didn't get any money, and they typically are not allowed to sue after because they agreed that they weren't terminated, or but it does
Correct.
come in handy. It's another course of action that you can take as opposed to being terminated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the language that was escaping me is that it all kind of boils down to like what's your leverage specific to mutual separations is what leverage do you have? Like again, in the spirit of transparency, like if I know where the bodies are buried, that's my leverage, right? And so that's going to be the thing that
Mm-hmm.
enables me or
Correct.
emboldens me to like ask for that mutual separation. That will depend on your role, your positionality in the organization. So like your level of like how kind of empowered you feel to enter that conversation will vary. But like that's how I enter the conversation.
And the one thing I ask my friends, even when we are talking about these things, and it's, I think, just having so many friends in HR, one of the things I have learned to ask them, like, is it simply unfair and you don't like it, or is it against the law? So
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that you really want to know, because unfortunately, going in with just, oh, this isn't fair. This isn't what I like. I don't like this. This isn't right. Right? This person gets to work remote. I don't. Trust me, I have had those days. But it takes for somebody to reel you in and be like, now, is this just, this just is kind of, I don't know if you can curse on here, but this is just, if this kind of messed up, or is
Uh-huh.
it just against the law? It's two different
Uh-huh.
things. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it takes a whole lot of this isn't fairs to create against the
Mm-hmm.
law. You can't go in with one, this just isn't fair, and think that this person has broken a law. Because most times then they can speak to it. It can be BS, but they'll
Mm-hmm.
speak to why it was that way. But if you have a collection, a litany of things that are unfair, then we working with something. But if it's just a random every now and then, well, I got to come in here early today, but I ain't never seen the other person come in here early. No, that's not going
Sorry, we like keep feeding off of each other because that is, I spend a lot of time on social media. There's a lot of HR bashing. I'm fine with it. The check still clears. But Marshall, what you said was so key is around we're looking for patterns. We have to be objective in our work, right? So like, yes, it's not fair, cool, but what is it? Can you anchor it in a policy that was broken? Can you anchor it in a law that was broken? Like that's the thing that I'm assessing for. Certainly, like a lot of things are not fair. Again, as us as Black people, many things are not fair. But like, how do you make sure you're disrupting? Oh, it through the lens of like objectivity. If that's not happening, that's the thing I want to understand. If policies are being broken, that's the thing I want to understand. So like, that's the piece that I would want to encourage folks that I want you to come to me as your HR business partner. Like I get a lot of joy being able to advocate for like vulnerable populations. Like that's what encourages me in this work. But I need you to help me in that. Help me connect the dots. Like not just saying simply it's unfair because like a lot of things are not unfair. Like what is the policy that was broken or the law that was broken or all the other things. But like help me understand that piece. Ooh,
on. I
am I
can't
hearing
hear
you?
you.
I can't.
Sorry, I put myself on mute because I live by a police department every day. I don't know if it's a routine or something. But yeah, I think it kind of ties back to when Marshall mentioned everything needs to be in black and white. Not only what you say, but also like what does his policy say? And also be as you say HR. I'm also on HR. We already have a bad rep. Oh, we're here just to fire people. We're here just to get in your business. No, like you said, we're here to connect the dots. We just can't just, it's unfair. But how is it unfair? Do you have, X, Y, and Z to say why it's unfair? But that's my little input on it. All right, let's see. We're good on time. Perfect. So, Marshall, for LGBTQ plus workers, especially, the decision to escalate isn't just logical, it's personal. You're deciding how much of yourself you're willing to put into a formal process, how much visibility you can handle, and whether the institution you're reporting to can actually be trusted. When you think about that decision for yourself or for someone what goes into it?
A lot goes into it. What I always ask people and what I try and do, I already know I come into any role that I'm in sticking out like a sore thumb. It doesn't matter how accepting people are. I am coming into
Mm-hmm.
work with a purse, heels, nails, and jewelry. I am going to stick out. My sticking
Mm-hmm.
out has always had to be a strategic sense where I had to be very good at what I do. And my
Mm-hmm.
philosophy was that if it ever comes to a point where I would have to do something like that to defend myself, there is literally nothing that you can pull on me. Now, understanding people can create things, mistakes happen, all of those things, right? Like that's whatever. But I
Mm-hmm.
tried to not hand you things on a silver platter, like attendance. It's the easiest thing to get right. Just attendance, right? Task, following up on emails, all of those things. So I do all those things, right? So that if it ever comes to that point, people can't say, because what they'll try to poke for and look for is where you were screwing up as to why they
Mm-hmm.
treated you how they did. But if I haven't given you any reason and I've been a stellar employee, and all of my documentation, you've never sent me anything that says I've done anything otherwise. And all of the positive feedback, I've worked with a boss who seemed to forget the positive feedback that she gave. Well, that's okay because I remind you. And so I put it in an email.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that comment that you made today. I really do appreciate it, right? And then I also
Mm-hmm.
blind copied my personal email so that I have all
Mm-hmm.
those things when that comes up. Because unfortunately, when you are a minority, you don't have much to fall back on. And any
Mm-hmm.
given thing that you absolutely hand over to them that you have done wrong, they will latch onto it and not let it go like a dog with a bone. And so I try my best to not give anything where you could out me as wrong so that by the time we get in front of these people, you are strictly speaking on your personal feeling for me, which isn't going to really fly.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you wish someone had told you about navigating that decision early in your career?
All of it. No, I'm just, I would, oh my God, I wish someone had told me so much.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I wish someone had told me was that most of it is going to feel unfair. That's the first part. There was
Mm-hmm.
this belief that I had that I'd come into work and I'd do the job to the best of my ability. I'd watch my friends do their jobs to the best of the abilities. They'd get the promotions, they'd get the salary increases, they'd get the recognition. Those were all things that I thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wish that there was more conversation about the black tax that you pay when you are in corporate America or anywhere in society for that matter, but especially in corporate America. I wish someone had told me a little bit more about early on, like I learned it eventually, but taking my emotion out of the job. And I also wish someone
Mm-hmm.
had told me a little early on how much people do not care. You
Yeah.
are a blip on their calendar, right? And they like you because you do what it is you're supposed to do for them that takes the work off of their plate. But in full honesty, unless they just have a disdain for you, people could care less about you. And I
Mm-hmm.
have seen staff members who were sick and people who didn't have money to barely get to work, and it was still business as usual. No one cared. And so I wish someone had told me that people do not care and that you will pay a black tax. And most of the people that you see navigating corporate America and are climbing the ladder, it is not due to talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And kind of to like piggyback off of, seeing people sick and not, how people are so big on, well, I would say like older generations, like me talking to my older uncle, aunt, my mom, my grandparents, they're all like, why are you off work? Why are you on vacation? Why are you doing this? Like, this is what it's here for. I'm not finna just work to the bones. Like, this
Mhm.
is what it's here for. And they don't understand that. I think more of our generation is more like, let's be cool. Like the work is getting done. If I'm off, if I'm on the beach, if I'm in the sand, it's getting done. It shouldn't matter what am I doing outside of those 8 hours, that 8 or 10 hours that I'm working. It shouldn't matter what I'm doing on my free time.
Yeah, that is
Moving on
definitely a
to
generational thing.
for sure. We will get to questions and answers in a second. Are we good on time? Yes. So, I would like to shift gears, be back to you. If someone is, watching tonight and they're currently in a hostile situation, things are fine or at least not obviously bad. What is one habit or practice you would want them to build right now before anything's happened?
Um, man, I have a whole list, so let me go through my list. The first thing, like acknowledging that you can be like, there's something to be said about being in environments where things are okay, and because you're so accustomed to things being like frantic, it's hard to like know how to navigate in those environments. So I would say give yourself like grace to know that you can thrive in this environment. People want you to. By and large, want you to be successful. You can make that assumption. Maybe it's not true, but at least operate with that assumption. That being said, I think maybe as soon as day one, having the conversation with your manager or even your skip level, probably even both. Like, what are the best ways to work with you? Do you have a document? Like when I worked at DoorDash, all the executives had a document around like how to work with this executive or that executive, right? And so that was something that was socialized. Having that direct conversation with your manager, right? And that means you're in the spirit of like we talked about managing up. Like this is the things that you're arming yourself with to be able to manage up, but also meet their expectations. So having those proactive conversations are going to be super important. We talked about the one-on-one document. If you're not utilizing it today, please start utilizing it to like document and just gain alignment in that document. Have a shared place where you are having that gain alignment with your manager is going to be super important. We talked about Slack, but I'll just call it out again. Be mindful of Slack and Teams. Be mindful of what you're putting in there. And on the flip side, if someone's saying something crazy to you, you can and you should demand that that be resurfaced so that you can use or screenshot it. Right? There's nothing wrong with screenshotting it, but also know that it can be resurfaced if you decide to take legal action. The other last two things around asking for help. This is big because for us as like high performers, we talk about having to work twice as hard, which is absolutely true. I also want us to know that it comes in ebbs and flows. Like I identify as a high performer. I had a baby and things just changed for me when I got back to work. I wasn't myself, and me and my manager had to have a difficult conversation. And I told her I'm struggling, and so they encouraged me to take time off, take a leave of absence. But like what the lesson here is like, don't wait till you're like at your wits end to be able to ask for help. Most of the times, managers will appreciate the fact that you're proactively asking for help. So when you're noticing a drop in yourself, because life is hard, every day you're getting opening up your apps and you're seeing someone was killed. Please take care of yourself. But the way you do that is by proactively asking for that help, whether it's FMLA or whatever that is, whatever that might look like. And the last thing, I'm a huge proponent of this because we talk about the experiences of like minoritized groups in these corporate spaces. Sponsorship. I've dedicated so much of my life thinking about sponsorship, but sponsorship allows you to like fly and glide in ways that I can't even put the language together. But like I had an executive sponsor who was a white man. He was a head of engineering and he took me under his wing. But because people knew he was my sponsor, nobody messed with me. Like I like it gave me a shield, and I want everyone to experience that shield. And so executive sponsorship is so huge, and so that comes from like your skip level, right? Your manager's manager. Like start to figure out how you can cultivate those relationships because it does give you some type of like shield in the organization, that you can just like, I don't want to say chill because the stakes are high everywhere, but it allows you to just like show up a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is one of that last part was probably the truest thing that I've ever heard. That sponsorship and relationship building will save you 1,000 miles of trouble. Like it is so crucial. There are often times that people don't realize that, but corporate America is one big game. And you are as good as who you have in your back pocket. And going in hating the world every day, listen, the world is tough, but when you get in there, you got to act like you love it. And you got to find you some people
Yes.
who wield a lot of power to actually advocate for you because likability
Mm-hmm.
and talent are not going together. They are two separate
Nope.
things. And most of the people are making it off of likability. And so, if you want to survive this, it is likability. The people who you think
Mm-hmm.
everyone kiss up to and all of that, you need to find you a little place to kiss too. If you're going to collect a check, you got to find you a place too, because it is what will save you.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability to ascend in an organization is not going to be attributed to like the work. Your work output is going to be attributed to the more senior folks who are spending their social cachet on you, the
Yep.
folks who are in the rooms that you're not in, who are going to put your name into that room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the work is going to change, right? As you go up the ladder, you do different stuff, different tasks. So I believe if you could learn one skill, you can learn two or three. It's not that. I need you to be in that room and be likable to get us our deliverables. And I need you to be likable so that you can deal with all of the difficult people that annoy the hell out of me because they like you. That's what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, Marshall, what do you actually do, day to day to protect yourself, not just professionally, but as a person who has to show up in these different environments?
I work really hard on my relationship building. It's typically
Mm-hmm.
like the number one thing I do because I always know that I'm going to have to go the extra mile anyway. So I just started out that way. And so for me, a big portion of my day to day is working on those relationships, making people feel seen, making people feel heard,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for different people. I do still have a bit of optimism that when you do good, some comes back to you. And it has worked in
Mm-hmm.
my favor. So I'm gonna try to hold on to it. I mean, that could change tomorrow, but for today, it's working.
Yeah. Got it. I think it's kind of lagging. Can y'all hear me? Okay, perfect. All right. So we have about 5 minutes. And I want to, close out and give you y'all time to answer Q&A. We do have a couple questions. So this is from Sade. She said, loving the dialogue may be out of the scope of the conversation, but any advice on how one navigates direct reports that are skilled at utilizing or weaponizing language to avoid accountability? How best to surface the pattern to HR business partners without sounding unsupportive?
So how to? Oh, it's right on my screen. I got it. Loving the dialogue. How to
It's
navigate
pretty.
skill that. Okay.
I would. Oh, sorry. Go, B.
I was gonna say, and I would love your perspective as well, Marshall.
Mhm.
But from where I sit, no matter how gifted this person is at weaponizing it, there are in most organizations, and if your organization doesn't have this, maybe this is a thing you prioritize to be able to anchor yourself. But in my organization, at least, I make sure my managers have something that is called a career ladder framework, right? Within that, there is clear guidelines around what is expected of someone at every level, right? There's clear objectable language around what is expected of everyone at each level. That being said, I have a lot of ICs who are really gifted at like trying to like reverse the responsibility, but I have my managers go back to this expectation guide. As an I5 or IC5, you are expected to do this, and you're not doing these things, right? It is very clear in black and white to Marshall's earlier example is that you're not meeting these expectations, right? I've asked that you deliver XYZ thing, you have not delivered it. And that's where it lives in the one-on-one doc, right? So in your one-on-one doc, every week you're talking about what the deliverables are. I don't care what language that person is using. What it boils down to is like what is being asked of them and what they've delivered. And if they haven't delivered against it, that is the thing that you bring to HR, and your HR partner will help activate around like, okay, what to think about what the next steps are. Because sometimes it could be, personal life experiences where folks are navigating, or it could actually be someone is actually not doing the work and we need to manage this person out. But I think it starts with just like having clear levels, expectations for that person, and communicating to that person like, hey, these are the expectations, or you're not meeting the expectations.
Yeah, I agree. I
Marsha, did
think
you have any input?
all
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what B said. I think that we've all had employees who's tried to weaponize those things. I think a fact is a fact. And there's an old saying that my grandmother used to say, a lie don't care who tell it. And so you can
Mhm,
make up whatever you want. I am coming to you
mhm,
in, again, that black and white thing, right? So I will pull reports, I will see productivity. So I'm speaking to you about strictly the facts. And if I am, again, that reading the room thing, if I know that this is what you have the propensity to do, then you and I need have no conversations about anything except work. So there isn't anything for you
mhm.
to misinterpret it. There's nothing for you to misconstrue. This is strictly about work. And here is the paperwork that supports everything that I'm saying to you about you.
Mhm.
Black and white, clear as day.
Yes. Next question. As an ally in the workplace, what is actually helpful versus not helpful?
I always say listening and not
Mhm.
peppering your experience into someone else's. I think
Mhm.
one of the strongest things that brings a wedge into that ally is that a lot of times people try and put in their experience into someone else's. I had a friend of mine who spoke to me about the fact that me coming and showing up as an effeminate gay male gave me more leverage than her as a black woman in corporate America. Now, of course, I've faced my own challenges being black and gay, but it wasn't the time, nor is it ever the place for me to pepper my experience into hers. That is her lived experience. And so my goal is to try and help understand your experience, be empathetic to your experience, and try not to be a part of that experience. And I think that's the best thing an ally can do. I don't think an ally by themselves truly can, they can begin a shift, but they can't completely shift everything. That's a lot of work on one person. But I think allyship just looks like standing beside the person.
Yeah, I would say allyship, depending on your positionality, I'm making a lot of assumptions, but depending on your positionality in an organization, allyship also looks like advocating for folks of color, underrepresented folks of color, to get high visibility projects, right? Like, part of what we're seeing now is that not only are black women being kicked out of the workforce, but I am amazed where some people are like, oh yeah, I'm only like, I'm paid XYZ dollar, or I'm only this level, a very junior level. And like, there's so much work that we need to do to be able to disrupt that. So assuming you have some like organizational power, how are you advocating for underrepresented folks of color to get high visibility or projects or initiatives so that they can, if assuming that's what they want, be able to ascend in the organization?
Yeah, for sure. And last question, Sharita asks, what is executive sponsorship?
Yeah, executive sponsorship is basically when a very senior individual in an organization uses their social capital on you. And what that looks like, it's almost akin to mentorship, but this person is helping you to understand what your goals are and basically breaking down the doors to make those goals come true. So, like my executive sponsor, for example, when I told him I wanted to be an HR business partner, he was like, come be an HR business partner in engineering. Like, we had no process. There was no, he just said, you're going to do this and you start on this date, right? Because he
Mhm.
had the power as the head of engineering to make that happen for me. And so it's basically people with power who use their power to help you unlock your potential and, most importantly, your career aspirations.
Yeah. Do anyone?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think networking is going to be the strongest thing that we have right now in this current climate. I am
Mhm.
really big on that. I will look into the org chart and see who has a very high title and cold email them. And I will straight say that I have admired your career and I would love for us to connect. Now, I may not know nothing about their career, but I know that they sit at the
Right.
top right here, and this is what this title say. So I need to be sitting in front of
Mhm.
them so that when something pops up, they can say Marshall this. And sometimes that is a segue for They may not have an operations role for me, but maybe they have a finance role for my friend who's a minority that I can say, well, here, take this resume. I think that they would be good for this opening.
Mm-hmm. All right, you guys. Before I let our panelists go, I want to give each of them a moment for a final word. If you had one thing tonight you wanted someone watching, if you had one thing someone watching tonight to walk away with, what would it be? Do you want to be Marshall, whoever?
Just one? I'm just kidding. I gave y'all a whole list of things. I'm just kidding. I'm just gonna ride this executive sponsorship. I know
Mhm.
there's a real significant gap. I see how our community is hurting and being impacted by layoffs, and even from a job searching perspective, right? Like it is those executive sponsors that you get to activate to like unlock opportunities. I'm actually going into a new opportunity because of my sponsor, right? So I really, really encourage us for those of us who are occupying corporate spaces, how are you investing time in building meaningful relationships with senior leaders?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'd agree with that, and I'd also say, please, please, please read your rooms. Know who you're working with. See who holds the power. See who shakes the room. See who, when they speak,
Mhm.
everyone listens. Be likable. And unfortunately, talent is not going to open the door. It's going to be that likability factor. That is the one thing I would tell anyone who was listening to please. Your safety depends on it. Your career trajectory depends on reading the rooms you are in, knowing the people that you
Mhm.
are with every day, what they're capable of, what they will do, what they may not do. Those are the things that are going to help protect you and get you to the next level.
Yes. Well, thank you both, B. Away and Marshall Heck. This conversation mattered, and I'm grateful you brought your full selves to it. To everyone watching, you came here tonight because you take your safety serious and you take your right serious. Sorry, that matters. Keep documenting, keep asking questions, and remember, Cageburg HR is here to help you navigate this. Everything we talked about tonight. That's the exact work we do one on one through our discovery packages. If I'm having word salad right now. I'm so sorry. And if nothing is urgent right now, good, save this, follow us. So when the moment comes, you already know where to come. We built Cageburg HR because workers needed a place that's actually on their side. It'll be in follow up emails. We'll have resources and a recording link to your inbox. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Bless.